So I've just got done watching the Rebuild the Galaxy Pieces of the Past miniseries. I think that's what we would refer to it as, because it's 4 episodes, 25 minutes, and it is the second series in this Rebuild the Galaxy world. I very much enjoyed the first series when it came out last year, and I was expecting more of the same. Before I get into the review, which is hopefully not going to be too long, it is going to be fairly kind of surface level. I want to just caveat it with a few things. So firstly, talking about surface level, if you're like me and you enjoy shows and really look at the depth of the story and the characters and the logic behind everything that happens, you've got to try and recognize that this is a show that isn't meant to be taken super seriously. It's not, meant to affect canon in any way. It's a fun show for all ages that's supposed to exist in its own bubble. Don't take it seriously. So, don't analyze things too much. And that's why this is just going to be a very surface level review, because the show itself is mostly surface level. And for me to enjoy something, I do have to detach myself if that's the case. Secondly, I recognize that this show, for the most part, exists purely to push Lego products. It's there to create new toys, to push old toys. There was a couple of moments in the show that I'll talk about in a bit where I was rolling my eyes at that's what they're trying to do. That's what they're pushing. And just linking into that, so again, that ties into the whole, it's not a super serious thing. It's got multiple purposes, but there is a big commercial purpose to this show. And just tying into that, when I talk about Lego itself, from my perspective, I loved Lego growing up. Before it was a big brand deal with many companies, and it was just its own creative little thing, building blocks for kids. And as the years have gone on, and it's become this kind of corporatized, branded, overpriced bit of plastic, I've really found my distaste for it growing as the years go by. So again, I had to kind of separate myself from that. And it's probably why I'm not massively into the Lego games, the Lego shows and movies. I only really pay attention when it's Star Wars. So again, I try not to let that affect my opinions of stuff like this, because it's just supposed to be a bit of fun. Speaking of fun, let's start off on just a couple of the things that I felt were weak. Firstly, did I enjoy the show? Yes, absolutely I did. Did I enjoy it as much as the first series? Probably not. It's not to say it was bad, just I didn't find it as compelling or entertaining as the first series, and there's just a couple of small reasons for that, I think. The first one is the villain, Solitus, who, again, kind of comes out of nowhere. If this was a super serious show, then I'd probably be more critical of the tropey backstory where he's the master who's turned bad, Jedi Bob's master, and he's now the bad guy. But the thing that really bothered me about the character is that he just seemed to have no motivation. He wants to destroy the galaxy into oblivion and have everything be silent. Okay, why? Why do you want that? And it was only until the last sort of 10 minutes of the last episode that they even touched on potential motivations. And I thought that it was quite clever how they tried to tie something very real into it. And I thought if they'd have done this from the beginning, it could have been so much better. It could have been a bit of a self-commentary, because what we see is he does not like, or the weakness that he has is when you try to introduce chaos, creativity, things that don't quite make sense, that disrupts his power or his focus. And that very much, to me, reflects the way that Lego has gone. And it was almost like it was saying, back in the past, kids just used to make their own things. They didn't make sense. They didn't, to an outsider, it was just a bunch of miscoloured, misshapen blocks. But to that kid, that was something super creative and it had a purpose. And so I almost saw it as like Solitus was the adult in that situation, where just because he couldn't comprehend the creativity, that was his downfall. And if they'd have played on that more throughout the show, where his intent was to create order, because he very much likes the stylized, sort of branded way that everything is almost just the same now. Everything has a structure and a look to it, and it's supposed to be built a certain way. If that had been the motivation, that had been a really interesting self-commentary on the way that Lego has gone from, again, all those years ago being whatever you want it to be to now it has to be this because the branded deal, you have to build the Lego Millennium Falcon, whereas 25 years ago as a kid, 30 years ago as a kid, I'm underselling myself a little bit there. I could have made a Millennium Falcon from all those bits that wouldn't have looked like the Millennium Falcon, but to me it was. That would have been a really interesting concept, but he didn't really have much of a motivation to me, so he was a bit flimsy as a bad guy. But again, it's a fun show, let's not pick it too much. Another thing that, again, I just felt was a little bit weak was the continuation of the theme, I guess. For me, I realised that the more that you do this, the more that you kind of play on the whole opposites aspect, good guys are bad guys, the more it kind of becomes expected. The more it's like, oh, okay, well, of course, Obi-Wan's going to be a Sith. So it loses its kind of unique selling point the more you do it. And that's why I think they can't really do more than just another series at this, because people will become a little bored of the concept and they will need to rely on the characters at that point to fully take over. And I don't know, for all of the fact that the characters are fun and I enjoy them, I don't know if they're strong enough to carry a series on their own, just from their own personalities and stories, without the concept of rejigging everything and making everything new and the mix of designs. So they have to be careful with that. But other than that, I really did enjoy the show. I thought that, again, there was some good humour in there. Again, they didn't really take themselves too seriously, and at times they were actively making fun of themselves. There was one point, I can't remember specifically what it was referring to, but Luke just actively says, oh, who cares, when it was coming to something to do with the sequel trilogy. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, that's quite a blatant kind of just like, this doesn't really matter, so whether that was poking fun at themselves for, maybe the criticisms of the sequels, I'm not 100% certain, but it didn't take itself too seriously. There was some fun bits, again, Palpatine's sort of scream when he does his spin attack is always fun to see out of context, and I think they recognise that there are things that Star Wars fans make fun of in a good-hearted way, and they weren't afraid to, take advantage of that. Just again, the characters themselves, continue to be fun, relatively relatable, nothing too special, like I say, I think that they're as good as they were in the first series, and the new characters that were introduced, were interesting enough. There was nothing that stood out to me. Jackson, I guess, was, as they mentioned, a bit of a deep cut, a character that was introduced back in the 70s in the comics, and then was absent for like 30 odd years. Then suddenly sort of cropped back up in the Disney era for a bit, and now is in this again. Being voiced by Ben Schwartz, I think it was, who voices a hedgehog, famously. And, some of the other characters as well that were introduced were Darth Revan, I think, was probably the one that everyone was kind of like, oh, that's like the first time we've seen Darth Revan outside of Knights of the Old Republic in this, really goofy Lego show. But I know he was in the trailer a few weeks ago, so it wasn't a surprise per se, but it was just more of an interesting kind of like, oh, that's, a character that everyone's wanted more of, and he's suddenly here. Cal Kestis as well, first time outside of a video game, making an appearance in a Lego animated show. Ahsoka wasn't as bad as I thought she was going to be. I've got a bit of Ahsoka fatigue, just because of how heavily she's been involved in everything. And I thought when she kind of came along for the ride after episode 1, I was like, oh god, she's going to be like one of the main characters here again, and we're going to suffer with Ahsoka fatigue. It wasn't quite that bad. And to be fair, I felt a little bad because I felt like they really sold her short, making her this brickhead character. For anyone who is not aware, that the brickheads are supposed to be for people who don't have as much time to just sit there and build with the little pieces. So these are bigger pieces that you can, obviously put together in a smaller amount of time, but they just look really ugly to me. And then I realised at the end, oh, well, it's not just Ahsoka they're pointing at. The whole Rebels crew showed up and they were all these blockheads or brickheads. And I was like, oh no, they're trying to make that parallel of, well, Rebels is that unique art style from Ralph McQuarrie, and they're trying to, I don't know if it's trying to poke fun at them or just pointing out that, hey, they're different. I just felt like, firstly, why weren't they in this earlier? Because I really like the Rebels crew. And why have you done that? And it doesn't make sense because Ahsoka's not even a Rebels original character. She's from the Clone Wars. I know she was in Rebels, but yeah. So that was one thing that popped up to me, and I was like, why do that? The moment where, as I mentioned, I had my eyes roll was when the Death Star showed up. Now, initially, we see the Death Star as its spherical, original Lego shape. And I laughed to myself a bit because obviously I made that video a couple of weeks back about the new Lego Death Star set and how overpriced and stupid it was. And people were arguing with me about why would you care if it's spherical? And I just sat there and thought to myself, well, because it looks at least fairly accurate when it shows up on screen. It's the big Death Star, it's the sphere. And I thought to myself, well, they're probably not going to have that new one because it's just come out and it probably, was still in design at the time they were animating the show. It takes a while to animate, so they probably didn't have time to throw it in there. Lo and behold, that new Lego Death Star set shows up and, they spend a good couple of minutes on it, highlighting every single area, and I'm like, okay, this is what they're doing. They're showing us, hey, look at what we've just released and let's go in depth and show you all the little areas you could have fun with because this is a new overpriced piece of shit toy that we've released. Sorry, maybe that was a bit harsh, but I do think it's a horrendously overpriced scam. Really, that's what that is. It's a scam. So I rolled my eyes at that bit, but once we got beyond that, I was kind of like, okay, yeah, no, this is interesting now. We go into this Forcehold world where we meet more mishmash characters and the giant Chewbacca, which I was really disappointed that they did not play up on the one element of Lego Chewbacca that everybody seems to know. Anyone who has taken a visit to Galaxy's Edge or has even seen it on the internet, which has got to be the vast majority of people, knows that Lego Chewbacca is thick, really thick. And it's absurd because it's Lego. How do you make a Lego character thick? And yet, so I'm thinking when we see Chewbacca coming, I'm thinking, okay, they're going to reference that in some way. And they didn't. They didn't at all. I was like, that's a missed opportunity right there, which everyone would have gotten. And it doesn't have to be obvious. It's just like, have it framed some way, so you can be like, I know that. Very much like the meme, the Breaking Bad meme, I think it's the Leo meme, isn't it? Not Breaking Bad. I'm getting distracted now. But as I say, they're playing on those same themes of the rivalry between the brothers, the good versus bad, trying to, save the galaxy, reconnect. There was all kinds of mishmashes of different characters. We see Padme, C-3PO, and R2-D2 show back up, which is, again, another little fun thing that I thought was quite creative, and again, they rely on some of the older characters as well, all the old Sith characters. But it was fun. Like I say, I would certainly say that if you're into this kind of thing, give it a go. You'll probably enjoy it. But I just, again, feel like it's maybe running its course now. Maybe do one more, if that, because it's clear that they don't intend to sort of have this story round out by everything going back to the way it was the beginning. So it's hard to kind of pin down an end to it, especially with the way it ended between the two brothers at the very end. They're seemingly making up, but they kind of left a bit of a tease in there with the Sith characters, so maybe they will bring it back for a third season, but then I think that should be it. But yeah, as I say, don't take it too seriously, realise that there's a commercial aspect behind it, and you'll probably have a lot of fun. That's what I did. So yeah, let me know what you thought of it in the comments. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you for the next video.